Me once again this week is WDW Pro from thatparkplace.com. Link in the description as always. And Pro, it's great to see you, but I think there's some other guy floating around backstage here. Do you want me to pull him in? Do you know this guy?
Well, now wait a minute. Is this someone that you are familiar with by any chance?
Slightly.
Maybe the audience would know who this might be?
Probably so. I think the audience has been asking for this guy to come back. So here he is. Everybody, you asked for it. We give you what you want. Unlike a lot of Hollywood studios, we just want to give the audience what they want. Here's Kamran Pasha. Welcome back.
Renegade Online.
Well, welcome back, folks. Another great day here at Valiant Renegade. It's good to see everybody out there. And if you're like one of the many folks watching this video not yet subscribed, please take a moment, do hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker out on the social medias, and of course, do drop a comment below the video before you head out the door today. And with me once again this week is WDW Pro from thatparkplace.com. Link in the description as always. And Pro, it's great to see you, but I think there's some other guy floating around backstage here. Do you want me to pull him in? Do you know this guy?
Well, now wait a minute. Is this someone that you are familiar with by any chance?
Slightly.
Maybe the audience would know who this might be?
Probably so. I think the audience has been asking for this guy to come back. So here he is. Everybody, you asked for it. We give you what you want. Unlike a lot of Hollywood studios, we just want to give the audience what they want. Here's Kamran Pasha. Welcome back.
Thank you, Valiant. It's such an honor to be back. You have such a wonderful channel. And this is a big moment because I've never been on any channel with the great WDW Pro, and I've been a follower of that Park Place, and like I said, I sometimes show up in the comments under a fake name and share my perspective. But now I'm finally here with my real name and with WDW Pro, that's also his real name. And
so that's who that person is with the one IP address and 17 different accounts. Now we've identified you.
Yeah, well, I've got a little Surfshark thing going on. I got that from Andre, right?
There you go.
Gotta mask my comments. Yeah, they're all the comments that are coming from Bosnia or Albania are from me.
That's right. There's no VPN, no VPN involved.
It was kind of funny before we jump into the topic at hand, because I've gotten so many questions on this in the last few months. Cameron's been busy, Cameron's been working, and it was a ridiculous coincidence of timing that right about the time, and I went back and looked today, the last video Kamran and I did together was on March 24th. Since then, we've had a lot of news, and we've got about 5,000 new subs on this channel since then. And around the same time, Pro and I started talking, and I'm like, hey, if you ever want to do a video, come on. And the Pro, and you and I, Pro, started talking. A lot of people are like, would you replace Kamran with Pro? Can we get them both? And I'm like,
well, we're actually the same person.
Yeah,
we're the same person because I just have to use the Darth Vader voice thing, and I sound like Pro.
The theories grow at this very moment.
All right, now
why does Pro never speak while Kamran speaks? What's going on?
It's going to be like the joke Legal Mindset started, that I'm actually that umbrella guy, and he just will not let that go. So
I mean, I can buy that.
This is
fun. You got to say it. Do it for me. Fun times indeed. Say it.
Fun times indeed.
That's it.
I don't have quite the accent. So anyway,
it's perfect. What are you talking about?
Oh Lord, let me bring this up before we begin. Speaking of things that do not sponsor this show, because we don't have sponsors, and I don't want to say that we do even as a joke, because then YouTube goofs up the algorithms on that. But I want to thanks to Light Life with their Lightyear branded vegetable based hot dogs that are selling like hotcakes. No, they're not. This is a real thing. Have y'all seen this?
I think I saw it in clearance, yes.
Yes.
Smart dogs. So what? So it's Lightyear hot dogs. They're just hot dogs that they're branded, sort of like Wheaties kind of thing.
Yeah, they're plant-based hot dogs.
Oh,
And so, since Lightyear,
right.
which we're about to get into a little bit of that and some other Disney news, talking about Thor Love and Thunder and some other things we're going to go into.
So this is all part of the anti-meat agenda that's been shoved down our throat for 2 years now, right?
It is, but what we got the rebranded version as a not sponsor of Valiant Renegade, and that is Lightyear Lost Money Smart Dogs.
Oh,
Courtesy.
I see. I'll take
That's
that.
right.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Fat Steven Seagal. You can find him on YouTube and on Twitter.
And
It's not Rob Schneider.
Mr. Evans here, who of course did not see this coming from his comments.
No, he did not. But you know what? Make sure you get a weenie like Chris Evans that is 100% soy. And
I
enjoy
only
it.
wish they had chicken nuggets made from vegan materials in the shape of dinosaurs. It would be all the more perfect.
The people that make Dino Nuggets will do that next. Don't do that.
Well, I will say this because I'm a passionate carnivore. If you're a vegetarian, vegan, God bless you. Follow your own path. Don't shove it down my throat. And this weekend is the Islamic festival of the Eid al-Adha, where it honors the sacrifice of Abraham, where Muslims sacrifice an animal and give the meat to the poor. So that's 2 billion people that are going to be eating meat this weekend. So you can keep the crickets and you can keep this fake meat stuff. Not for me.
Let's see. I just cut my lawn. I'm gonna go take the baggings and make a burger out of it. No, thank you.
There's
Just
at
add
least
salt.
one
It
patty
tastes
in
the
that
same.
yard.
Oh, I'm sure there's at least one patty. Well, folks, it's great to have you both together, and I know a lot of people have been waiting for this kind of conversation with the three of us. Not to, toot my own horn here, but I guess everybody wanted y'all here together on this channel. So, I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad that so many people are wanting this conversation to happen here. Thanks to all the viewers, and thanks to these two fine gentlemen on the show right now, because they've been a big part in kind of creating this business environment that we have on this channel. Just kind of throwing out our opinions and talking turkey. So look, let's cover the obvious stuff. There's not really any new news with Lightyear except for the fact that it's still dead and it's still not going to get to 250 million.
And it's like sinking deeper and deeper into the sinkhole of death.
So we're looking at about $150 million in that range financial loss at the box office for Disney on this one. Is pretty ugly.
And it didn't. I don't think it ever was going to be a success. I just don't think the quality is there. It's certainly not Pixar level quality of storytelling. But the unnecessary nonsense they pulled themselves into, which we were going to talk about, which Mr. Chapek tried to pull them out of, brought even more damage than perhaps the quality of the movie did. So it's it is what it is.
Yeah, Chapek and Kareem Daniel, and Alan Bergman to another extent. These were the people that basically Pixar referenced, whether they felt like it was direct or indirect. Those are the three people they referenced when they came out publicly and said that they were trying to put overtly gay affection into all their movies, and that people above them, every time at Disney, would cut them out. Well, there's only three above them that did that. I know we talked about that here before. But, it's funny, we've had even Tom Hanks come out and make a comment in the last day or so about, I was surprised that I was hoping to go up against my buddy Tim Allen over there at the box office this weekend, because Tom Hanks was in Elvis and he was expecting Tim Allen to be Lightyear. Go figure. And was surprised to learn that he wasn't. And then you had, obviously other comments from, I thought it was impressive from Tim Allen himself. He was like, look, I didn't say anything because I was never involved in this project. He was never really approached. And he even went so far as to say, look, it's not the same Pixar. It's a totally different crew over at Pixar now than it was a few years ago, the last time we went around this ride. And we've talked about that. Lasseter and all the other guys now have left and gone to Skydance.
Well, but what's important about that is that he's not bringing that to the general public.
Yep.
Tim Allen is a beloved figure in the general public as an actor, going back to Home Improvement days, right? And the fact that most people are not aware of the internal politics of Pixar, what happened to Mr. Lasseter, they're just not aware of it. Mm-hmm. He's now brought that to their attention, which will fuel people saying, well, maybe you should clean up your house.
Yeah, and I think, in Pro, I want to get your thoughts on this because I was thinking about this today,
Mhm.
and I don't know why it didn't occur to me before. And Cameron, your thoughts as well. A lot of people have said, "Oh, well, you got some folks out there that'll say, well, okay, well, Tim Allen, Disney didn't want him around anymore because he's a conservative," and then people, of course, clap back with, "Well, he's in the Santa Claus sequels that they're putting on Disney Plus," which is correct. And it occurred to me and I don't know why I didn't think to kind of say this before. It's like, okay, there's a difference because the Santa Claus is not being made at the Pixar studios. And
Correct.
as we have found out, and Pro, let me know what you think of it. Pixar has got to be the most quote unquote woke studio at Disney right now, bar none. They came out on that one and they showed their hand. And it's no wonder that Pixar didn't want to work with Tim Allen anymore. But there's other elements at Disney that know, oh no, Tim Allen is a very viable property. Would be stupid not to bring him in. And they sacrificed the most popular character of the most popular Pixar franchise that ever was because of that. I don't know. What is your thoughts on that, Pro?
Well, it just seems to me that there is a fantastic parallel that we need to examine. So there are two studios which have been prolifically outspoken in one general political direction and far in that direction. And yet both of these studios within Disney, and Disney is a large company, so the fact that Tim Allen is appearing with other studios inside the company is no surprise. Disney is comprised of essentially many, many large businesses. But there are two studios in particular which have been very outspoken and very insulated from criticism through business strategy. As we're talking about Pixar, Pixar is one of those, and they have been shielded from us knowing the difficulties they would have in the marketplace because they have not been putting their material into the marketplace in a way that we can look at the numbers. So now we can see those numbers. Now, they struck, as you said, one of their more popular actors, one of the more popular celebrities. Everybody loves Tim Allen, right? They struck him out. Okay, what's the parallel here? Well, the other studio is Lucasfilm. Okay, Lucasfilm also, they're not putting anything out theatrically. So everything that they're doing is protected by the smoke and mirrors of streaming. And Kathleen Kennedy has even admitted that it makes it much more easy for her to produce material if it's going to streaming. It smooths out the process, if you will. Who did they remove? Well, they struck Gina Carano from Lucasfilm Projects. And so in both of these situations, whether or not the removal was related strictly to politics, you have a one-for-one parallel in that you've got two popular conservative actors who are removed from their characters, while at the same time the studio is completely insulated from showing their hand truly. And now we've reached the point where Pixar, well, the emperor has no clothes any longer, right? I mean,
Yep.
let's just put this before I wrap this little rant up, but let's just put this into perspective. Disney is the king or queen, if you will, of animated movies. They have been since the 1930s. They are the juggernaut of cartoon, animated, family films. They just had their lunch eaten by the Minions. The Minions, okay? And all this bogus nonsense about Lightyear being a spinoff, and that's the reason that it failed. The Minions that just came out, The Rise of Gru, is a sequel to a prequel. All right?
Of a spinoff.
Do you know how many days it took for the Minions to accumulate more money domestically than Lightyear? It took Lightyear 3 weeks to earn what the Minions did in 4 total days. 3 safely.
Yeah.
But some of the trades are reporting 4 days. But I agree with you. I go with the 3 days.
They
But
lumped the
that's how long
weekend
it
together.
took.
Yeah. The 3-day on Lightyear was 50 and a half officially. And then the 3-day on Minions was 105 by the point that Lightyear had gotten up to that. It broke 100 million, I think, on Sunday, according to, or maybe Saturday. So it's either day 16, day 17 versus 3 days, but it was definitely 3 days for Minions. But yeah, and again, you bring up the point. as Kennedy, I think her actual words were doing the shows, and this is from the Vanity Fair article that she did with all the Lucasfilm folks about a month ago now, that the streaming production afforded them the ability to avoid the scrutiny, was the word that she used, of a theatrical release.
Truer words have never been said.
I
by
can't
Kathleen
believe
Kennedy.
she let that in the heart, because I mean, like, yes, that's exactly what we've been talking about. When you get to hide things that aren't working that well, you know, and again, for good or for ill, whether you like the content or not, that's fine. You know, not here to discuss that. I just, you know, looking at it from the business side of things. But that's what they've been
think
doing.
about that. Think about that from the business side. Okay, so don't just look at it. Well, it's a loss of a certain amount of money for Pixar and the Walt Disney Company. Okay, we know it's going to be $150 million approximate loss. Okay, what was left on the table by this strategy, right? Because the projections for this movie 3 weeks, a month prior to its release said that this could be a worldwide $1 billion movie. So what was left on the table? And if you're the Disney board, if you're Bob Chapek, then you've got to be looking at this and saying, okay, how much money did we not get versus, we know the loss, but the loss is minuscule in comparison to what we did not receive that was easily within our grasp if we just hadn't fumbled this in every way possible.
Yeah.
So on that, if I'm before we jump into this chart, I actually want to build on that because you've brought up something very important, WDW Pro, which is you talk about the corporate and both you talk about the numbers. Now I want to talk about what I think I've gotten a little bit of a reputation on, sort of the Machiavellian behind the scenes chess game that I think is happening. And so far my predictions seem to have been right for about 18 months about this chess game, right? And so on this thing, if you are Bob Chapek and you are aware that Pixar is currently run by not as competent people as John Lasseter, with people with political agendas, and you realize that's affecting your bottom line. It's one of the reasons you've been, you know, they've been able to cover that bottom line by putting out Pixar movies on streaming. But because of the very point that you're raising, which is that, you know, that streaming allows them to mass reality, if you're Bob Chapek and you need the shareholders, the board, the general public to be aware of the situation so that you can fix it, what do? You put Lightyear out in theaters. Exactly what you did when you had to do with Shang-Chi, which was another Machiavellian play, because when Scarlett Johansson sued Disney for simultaneously putting out Black Widow on theaters and on Disney Plus, she claimed that she lost money because of that. And so his response was, sure, let's see if that's true. So he puts out Shang-Chi, which makes $100 million less gross without that extra boost of the combined streaming at the time. So he was able to shut, and Scarlett Johansson settled within 2 days of those figures coming out of the first weekend. She knew there's no way I'm going to win this because my movie did better than the other movie that came out theatrical. So theatrical has been Bob Chapek's sword for some time of showing us what's happening here. He's cutting through the veil that Kathleen Kennedy and others are talking about that's covering it. And so, especially with this project, which was tied into the politics of the Florida sex ed bill, which is tied into the politics of a brief same-sex kiss, right? That the Pixar executives insisted be kept in the cut, right? He said, okay, let's put it out theatrically and see what happens. Oh, the Middle East banning the movie? Latin America is putting the movie out in theaters with signs that say there's gender warning. There's gender ideology from America, from those gringos in this movie. You might want to think about seeing it again. The theaters are putting that sign out because they know their local populace will be unhappy when, it doesn't necessarily reflect their values. Bob Chapek knew that was going to happen. And he knew that these numbers, I believe he absolutely knew that these numbers were going to be the end result. And he did it on purpose. And it is not to me a surprise that within a week of this incredible disaster of Lightyear, he gets a full renewal for 3 years.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, as that was the telltale sign to me, was after all of this. And again, not to say that, his career is going to hinge, live or die on Lightyear, on one movie like this. Because again, like we've talked about, even Lightyear with $150 million loss is bad. Don't get me wrong, but Disney is still a company that rakes in $25 to $30 billion a year in gross revenues just from parks and merchandising. That's in addition to the billions upon billions more that they rake in from live sports on ESPN and stuff like this. So, but again, it just goes to show that when you're looking in the grand scheme of things, and we've all talked about this here and on our own respective sites, you know, Pro on that Park Place, Kamran on your Patreon, which of course we'll leave a link to that as well. You know, it's all the pieces are there, and he's been extended now through July of 2025. The handcuffs are coming off, but I don't think this is done yet because we're talking about Lightyear right now. But there's been a pattern, right? There's been a pattern. We got Turning Red, which was a direct to streaming piece. Turning Red featured, you know, sequences in there, and again, are these sequences in and of themselves bad? No, but these are movies that are still geared towards general audiences, like 5-year-old children. So when you have sequences in there about, and I don't know what Disney's obsession is now with feminine sanitary products in movies, but we had to do it in Turning Red. Now we're doing it in Baymax. Now we're injecting.
Which is where I want to push Kamran on for a minute too, on Baymax.
Yeah, and I was going to say, we'll do that. Let me just finish this one real quick. Now we've got the LGBTQ mix in Baymax, along with, you know, shopping for tampons, and then now we've got the LGBTQ stuff in Lightyear. We're going to have more LGBTQ stuff in this Strange World thing that may or may not see the light of theatrical day.
That's a teen romance. That's a teen LGBTQ romance, and that's my understanding of it.
Yes.
So that's another issue of underage stuff. So that's not.
Yeah, I mean these are Pixar and Disney animation movies that are supposed to be have always traditionally been held as this is something for general audiences you can take your 3-year-old to 4-year-old to and not have to worry about. Now again, if this were a movie, if this was like Family Guy or South Park, it's different, right? This is not. This is not right. Those are geared for older adult audiences. Most parents, again, we've had this discussion ad nauseum about, you know, we don't want to have certain conversations with 5-year-old children after a movie.
I just want to quote one thing, and I don't want to interrupt the flow, but on what you're saying, I just want to quote something that I just saw on Twitter, which is, I'm not on Twitter, but I can see Twitter. And someone posted this. It was a woman, it was a mother who posted this, and she said, she's talking about Minions, The Rise of Gru, and she said, I sat through a movie and was not assaulted by any messaging. My kid laughed. We didn't have to talk about anything serious afterward. That is my endorsement of Minions. That's it. That's all. But that says something.
Yeah. So, Kamran, let me push you just a little bit, okay? Because I want to see where you go with this.
Sure.
So, Baymax comes out after Lightyear. Disney has already identified by that point that pushing into this area is costing them big time money.
Yep.
Baymax comes out onto Disney Plus, and I have my sources, and I'm comfortable saying in this stream exclusively that I have sources saying that Disney is aware that Baymax is costing them subscribers. Okay. You're playing out this narrative that's occurring behind the scenes with people moving the chess pieces in the sort of this 4D play, right? Yes. Why do you think that Disney went ahead and put out Lightyear with its full amount of content? And by the way, let me say too, that the studio behind Baymax, and I think I may have said Lightyear on accident there, but the studio that put out Baymax, why did they put that out? And let me say that the Baymax studio set that show up in such a way that you had to watch every single episode in order to understand the last episode. So it's almost as if they wanted to format it so that they tied Disney's hands. But I still don't understand, after Lightyear comes out, why Chapek would allow it. And I say that because Disney Plus is where the stock value resides at this moment because of the speculation as to the future and the potential profitability. What say you about why that show made it, even after Lightyear proved this is a losing formula?
So I'm going to be able to answer that because I have several Disney employees who are members of my Patreon who feed me information, right? And I didn't have this kind of access before. I was just making stuff up based on my intuitions and my own experience of having worked at Disney a decade ago at Tron. But now I have these people on my Patreon. And so they sent me DMs recently, just a few days ago, on this topic. And one of them said, this is not known to the general public. I'm just reporting what he said, right? He said to me, this is not known to the public, but as an executive who works here, Bob Chapek has always internally has consistently stayed on message with us executives that he wants this crap out, that this isn't going to make us money. He even, at the height of the drama that happened with Florida and the bill, and he had to put out the little hostage video and all that stuff, said the internal messaging to us privately was, we're going to put an end to this because the market doesn't want it. That our customers don't want this, right? However, he has been, since the drama that happened, since the political drama and, about the Florida bill and the incredible explosion just in Hollywood. We know the general populace might have supported the memo that he put out saying we're going to get Disney out of politics. The general populace did support that, right? The customer base did support that. But within Hollywood and within the drama of this system, that became an effort to try to topple him, right? And I want to give a link into something that happened in the past. A name you may be familiar with, Mike Ovitz, who was once one of the most powerful people in Hollywood. He founded a Creative Artists Agency, which is the most powerful agency today. And he went from there, back in the 90s, he founded it. And then he went from there to actually be, I believe he was president of Disney. He was high-level executive, a very high-level person at Disney. That was his big thing of, I'm going to be a now powerful studio head. And he got fired. These were in the days of Eisner, before Bob Iger, right? Mm-hmm. And he got fired very quickly, within I think about a year, he got fired. And there was a lot of internal clashes. So the incident which revealed the power of this topic in Hollywood 20 years ago. This is the most powerful man in Hollywood. He wasn't able to, he got fired. And so he was saying, he didn't think that anything he said could have any repercussions. So he went to, I believe it was Vanity Fair. It was a major publication, did an interview about him and his experiences in Hollywood, founding CAA and the working with Disney. And the reporter asked, why were you let go from Disney? And this is what he said, one sentence, and it ended him. He said, I was targeted by I'm just quoting him, I was targeted by the, quote, gay mafia. Okay? When that one sentence came out, his career ended. The most powerful man in Hollywood, the founder of CAA, the guy who basically put Tom Cruise and others on the map on a whole new level, right? I was at the time when this came out, it was 2002 or so. I was at his new management company called AMG, which he had founded. And I literally joined that management company as a client about 3 weeks before, even 2 weeks before. And then this interview came out. I was like, well, this company's about to collapse, right? And it did. It ended up being, everyone fled the company. Everyone publicly disassociated themselves from Mike Ovitz because he was seen as attacking the LGBT agenda. It probably wasn't even, there wasn't T or Q in those days. So it was seen as
he became a pariah.
Yeah. And he became an absolute pariah to the point that this billionaire has been unable to produce anything in 20 years. So that context is, the same thing began to happen again with Chapek because people who are sympathetic to that community are very influential in Hollywood. There's a lot of people from that community who are in artistic and powerful positions. And they created such an emotional agitation to remove him that he said, okay, I have to now go judo. I can't go karate on this. I use martial arts metaphors because I study karate, right? So I'm not going to go direct like karate. I'm going to have to go indirect with a martial art like judo, jiu-jitsu, where instead of attacking, I let the opponent throw themselves on the floor, right? By just not resisting their energy. And so his public stance became exactly what we saw, which then caused a lot of anger in the Florida and much of the general public felt he had betrayed them, but he never vacillated, and to this day is not vacillated from the position that he was right, and now he's going to let them fall on their faces. So now, strike one of that was Lightyear, right? He said, okay, you don't want to listen to me that this kiss that you think is perfectly okay might not work in other parts of the world. You don't want to listen to me? Let's put it out there. Oh, okay, see what happened. But now he's got this thing. If he pulls that project as you'd like, WDW Pro, if he pulls it, tomorrow the deadline will be bigoted Chapek destroys LGBTQ project because he is an anti-gay bigot, which was they tried to build up before, and so that will end him. He's got to make this thing go away, and because my understanding is it's only going to streaming. Is that correct? It's not theatrical. Is that correct?
Which one?
Baymax. That's correct.
Baymax. Yeah.
So the great thing is, he can continue to keep the eye of Sauron off of him while getting the internal numbers that we're not seeing and showing them to Susan Arnold on the board and saying, look at this. Nobody wants this. Can we now stop making more of this stuff? If he kills anything that's in the pipeline, it will be used against him. If he just stops making stuff, it'll just dry up and go away. That is the information that is being given to me by members of my Patreon. It makes sense to me. It's the kind of thing that fits in his strategy, at least to me.
So the reason I had asked that was because I agree with everything you just said. The funny thing, though, about Disney Plus is if he does that strategy with Disney Plus and the damage is done there, one, it's harder to see in the public that it's directly related to, for example, Baymax, although Disney can see it. But then also, number two, it damages Chapek himself because it throws off their ability to meet the projections that they want to hit for new Disney Plus subscribers. So that's why I was curious.
And that's why you hit the exact issue. That's why he had to be renewed right now. Because
excellent point.
Those figures come out in 6 months, there will be people agitating to remove him and not renew him in February. That's why he pulled up. He said, that's why he got Peter Rice out now. He said, you have to renew me or we're all done. Right. And they got it.
Yep. Excellent points.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of moving parts there. So as far as Disney Plus goes, now first we're presuming what the depth of the impact of, in this case, Baymax is to the numbers. So let's say that they lost 1 million subs in North America. I don't know if it's that high. I don't think it would be. I'd be really shocked. Like if put it this way, if they come out and they end fiscal Q3 for Disney, which is June 30th that just passed. Now, of course, when did Baymax release? Because that's only been
out for like a week.
So here's the thing: is that it probably has no impact on the 630 numbers at all. No. If it has any impact, it would be buried in the next fiscal quarter, which is end of fiscal year. That'll end on September 30th, and that is the end of Disney's fiscal 2022 year. There's probably more than enough time that if it is impacting the Disney Plus numbers right now, today, this week, and next week, and the week after, there's still 10 more weeks or 12 more weeks in the quarter, whatever the hell we got. There's plenty of time to make that up, and they have other content in the pipeline that would then kind of mask that. I think the bigger issue for Disney Plus subscribership is going to be, especially in the next year, is what happens, and I'm glad to see the Wall Street people finally coming around to reality like I've been wanting them to do for a while, and that is that this all-in craze about, subscribers for Hotstar in India, it just ain't the end-all, be-all, and I was glad that Chapek showed restraint, Disney showed restraint when it came to renewing the Cricket League over there. That's going to have a bigger impact on Disney Plus numbers. Now, they secured the rights to the broadcasting in India, which covers like 10 times the number of households that streaming does. They did not reacquire the streaming rights. Those went to the Viacom conglomerate over there. The thing was, Disney got the broadcast for $3 billion equivalent US. The streaming rights alone went for $3.1 billion, and Viacom picked those up. I don't think they're worth $3 billion right now. Maybe in 5 years from now, when the contract renews, that argument could be made, but I think it was shrewd of Disney not to jump into that, because they're only making 76 cents average revenue per subscriber in Hotstar, and they can't afford to add another $3 billion in costs to that platform. So I think that was Chapek has done a lot of things that have been right. It's on the business side that most people don't see. They're seeing what's going on with the movies and stuff like that, and we're going to get to Thor here, I guess, now. But the point is, I think Cameron's right. There's a pattern going on with the films. And all this stuff, like we've talked about before, these films, a lot of the stuff we're seeing now was greenlit and put into motion 2-3+ years ago. Okay? It's the stuff that's getting greenlit now is, I think, what you're most likely going to see the changes in. And much of that stuff we may not actually see on Disney Plus or in a theater for another couple of years, potentially, a lot of it.
So let me just make one point real quick, and then we'll move on. What concerns me about Disney right now is that I think that their current slate that they've had this year, and which will continue, so we're going to have this same sort of thing going on into Hocus Pocus 2, into Strange World, etc.
Yep.
The problem is that all of these properties are contributing to brand degradation. And Disney has this built-in persona, this corporate persona that families for decades, okay, this is earned over decades, that families felt that their children were safe watching this. And so many people bought into Disney Plus with the idea that it was going to be a digital babysitter, right? So they're cooking dinner, they can put their kid in front of Moana and it's safe. I think that that's being degraded at a very rapid rate. Turning red, in my opinion, the whole stuff about the feminine hygiene products, that just doesn't matter as much as that the little girl defeats her own mother by twerking at her. I think that gets parents to take notice. Then you've got Lightyear comes out and shows parents are wise to it. Why? Because it did not have a big first weekend. Had it had a major first weekend and then a huge drop-off, we would have known that the word of mouth had gotten out and said, don't go and see this movie. The fact that it never took off in the first place meant families already knew. So now you've got Baymax coming out that confirms that new bias. The problem is that as you continue this, here's the big problem. Do you guys know what the Pareto principle is?
Yes, 80-20, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, okay. Disney, well, Cameron, do you want to explain it real quick? Because I'm rambling.
Well,
do you want to explain it real quick to the audience in case they don't know it?
Yeah, it's a statistical idea that seems to be borne out consistently in reality. That is, an example being that 20% of your customers will result in 80% of your sales. There's an 80-20 relationship to reality on many levels.
Right. At a high resolution, the total number of participants in a creative endeavor, the square root of that number will produce 50% of the success in any endeavor. Okay. Disney had this major advantage in that anything they produced simply by brand loyalty, they rode the wave of the Pareto principle, and these other companies didn't have a shot. Okay, guess what? They've got a shot now, and they are eating Disney's lunch. Spider-Man No Way Home. Look at what it did. It's from Sony, and it went as far away from what Disney's doing as it could. Look at the Minions. What are they doing? All they're doing is filling in the gap because now the audience has left Disney. So I think this is a fundamental damage to the foundation of Disney that needs to be reversed as quickly as possible before the public loses full trust in the company.
So now I want to respond to that with something that might startle our viewers, right? Because I think most of them aren't actually watching it. Is to my absolute surprise and delight, the one product that's come out on Disney Plus recently that has actually gone back to old school traditional Disney family value storytelling is Ms. Marvel. And that is not how it began. So anyone's followed my Patreon since last year, I've been posting multiple articles warning that I was afraid Ms. Marvel would be a disaster because I have several friends who work on the project, several who are writers, and people in the production. And they fed me a lot of problems that existed on the show and that it was essentially a woke disaster that was unwatchable. These are the people that worked on it, right? And that if you recall, Bob Chapek essentially pulled the plug on it and it was held. It was complete in February of 2021. It was in the can. And he wouldn't let them release it. He said, go back and reshoot. So I had lunch recently with a friend of mine who worked on the show and told me essentially the whole show was reshot under Bob Chapek and said, go back, get rid of all this, the very thing people were afraid of, the political identity, religious identity, so all the stuff that they thought, identity politics that they were going to push. He said, get rid of all of that. Make this a universal show that everyone can get. And they did. And I'm absolutely stunned. I watch Ms. Marvel every week with my mom. I haven't watched anything with my mom in decades. We sit down, we get popcorn, and we watch Ms. Marvel together because it is 1980s Little House on the Prairie storytelling with superpowers. Unfortunately, a lot of people, because they've heard about the comic and they've heard this and that, aren't watching it. But when they watch it, as I put on my Patreon, I said, people got to watch it. So a lot of my Patrons are like, I don't think so. But then they reluctantly watch it. They're like, wait a minute, this isn't what I thought. This is actually old value storytelling. But because of this thing you're talking about, where the foundations are damaged, people aren't even giving it a moment's chance to find out. So that is what Bob Chapek, that's an example. A completely woke show transformed into a completely family values. There's no twerking, it's about grandparents and children and respect for religious people. It's old school 80s storytelling. It's not even what the comic has become.
Sure.
So Chapek is trying, and we have to give him a chance, in my view.
Yeah, I agree. We have to give him a chance. And Pro, you make some great points on that as well with the stuff that's still coming, because I do agree, and I've talked about this in some of the last videos. I think there's a lot of brand damage that this is bringing, and it's not just one thing. And that's the point of bringing all this up. We went from Turning Red, then to Baymax, and then to Lightyear. And now we have Strange World. You bring up Hocus Pocus 2. Correct. That's going to have the main characters is I think the lesbian daughter, something along those lines.
Yes.
There's an LGBTQ relationship in that.
Well, and it's a teenager, so it never stops with it's never decoupled from minors. That's what's so odd.
Well, but that's part of an agenda, and that's why I just want to say again, Ms. Marvel is shocking because people said to me it's unrealistic because a Pakistani girl isn't allowed to date or even go out to a superhero convention. I was like, yeah, it's pretty much my leftist professor sister who's Pakistani doesn't let my teenage niece go on dates. We are very conservative. Muslims are very conservative people from a value system that would strike people as from the 50s, right? And that show is teenagers being teenagers as they once were. But again, nobody's watching it, so they don't know. So,
well, like you said, I think before, it may be playing better overseas, and not everything Disney makes is going to be really super geared in towards U.S. audiences necessarily. So, I mean, I'm fine with that. I haven't had Disney Plus in a few months. I haven't watched it. I don't know. But
your kids will like it. If you have a chance, watch it. I think your kids will. I would never recommend something because I was very worried about this show, and it turned out to be the exact opposite because of Bob Chapek. And I believe more things like this will be in production.
Well, I hope so, but I think you're right. There's some brand damage issues going on, and I think there's a few things they could do. One of it is that is if some of this certain type of content can be just easily cut out, edited, hit the cutting room floor kind of thing, and then you can put the program out as it is, then fine. Number two, stick a warning on there, like Disney Plus is so they so much love to do for older stuff, that this was shot at a different time, and some of these things in here people might find offensive. Well, put that on the content that you do with, like, hey, your 5-year-old, be warned, this is what's in the show. Do it for everything across the board. Do something. But there is a pattern going on right now where they are trying to shove this into everything, and apparently been trying to do this for years. Well,
they won't put that label on right now. It's look, I think it's a perfectly valid idea. As we're seeing, people are putting that label on there in South American theaters. The theaters are putting that label on for them, right?
Oh yeah.
But that would mean, again, they're dealing with a very agitated group of agitators here in Los Angeles, and putting that label on would mean what? You're saying that some people shouldn't support these values? That's absolutely immoral. It's like a religion, right? So you can't question it.
Oh, I know. Let them scream their heads off, though. At this point, I think I just we'll see what happens with this. We really will, and I think there's going to be more to talk about as the weeks and months go on. But I want to get to Thor, because this is the last big chance that Disney has for the summer. Yeah. Doctor Strange did. You can't call Doctor Strange a fail. 950 million worldwide box office. It performed very badly after its opening weekend, though. And that was one thing I thought that was striking. That is one of the lowest performing in terms of legging out from opening weekends, maybe the lowest performing of any of the Marvel franchise. And I said at the time, I think this bodes ill for moving forward with this. And we're going to see what happens. And Lightyear happens. Now we've got Thor, Love and Thunder. And the embargoes are lifting and the reviews are coming out, and it ain't looking pretty.
So I haven't seen the reviews yet. So the mainstream reviews from the New York Times and others are not positive?
They are not. Let me go ahead.
It was close to rotten earlier. So
yes,
really?
It was teetering on the edge of rotten. Let me go back and pull this.
While you find that, I mean, that also is reflecting a cultural change in Hollywood, because if you remember WDW Pro just a few years ago, the reviews, particularly Rotten Tomatoes, it was all propaganda, right? You have to like The Last Jedi, right? You have.
I think it still is.
Yeah, but the reviews are
Yeah.
changing. I felt that change with the Eternals last year. I wrote about it on my
Sure.
Patreon, where suddenly the reviews are this is not a good movie, and maybe we should make a movie about more than we got a bunch of diverse people here. Maybe give them a good story, right? And those were coming from formal reviews that would have once propagandized. You got to go watch it because there's brown people on there, right? And so if this is the change that's happening, that's part of the cultural shift. So we got a 71% right now, but why don't we scan and see what some of those reviews are?
Well, let me get to more of this because there's a pattern here I'm seeing develop. So here we go with the all critics.
Yeah.
Now let me pull up top critics. This is like Variety, Deadline, Rolling Stone, San Francisco Chronicle, New York Times. And that drops us all the way down to 58.
Look at that. That's a substantial difference. So that means that we're getting a lot of sort of bloggers and others saying, I love this movie. That's
right. The access media.
Got a hammer. Yeah.
Check this out.
The access media that depends on giving a good review in order to come back the next time. Let me say though, real quick, I think what's going on with these critic scores over the last year or two, I think the pandemic combined with the public's realization of what's going on, they couldn't keep going back to movie after movie and having a completely opposite take from the critic that they trusted. I think it's a self-preservation switch. I don't think that they've changed their philosophy towards how they review or what their purpose is. I just think that they are holding back for a little while until the next time they need to unload on a new Last Jedi comes around. So
yeah, but that might be a generation away because it is preservation. But I think if you're right, I think that there's a cultural shift happening in the populace that they're recognizing, which is also what's happening inside of Disney corporate suites. Whether they share the values or not of Lightyear, they recognize the populace may not.
Yeah, and this is, in case y'all didn't notice this is Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. 74% all critics, close to 71, just like Thor, 59%
same pattern.
top critics. So we all know what
By the
happened.
way, I agree with the general thing. I enjoyed the movie.
Yeah.
Right, I thought it was perfectly fine. So
yeah, and I mean, here's the thing: is that if this winds up playing out at a box office financial perspective, like Doctor Strange. That Thor plays out in that same manner, okay? And, we kind of briefly touched on this before, and I'm going to go back and bring this up. Look, going back to 6/9, June 9th, they had Lightyear thinking they was going to pull around $100 million its opening weekend. This is from Box Office Pro. You go down here, Thor Love and Thunder, 155 to 205 was the range that they were giving it then. Okay, so now we're going to go down to Thor Love and Thunder today. Okay, 140 to 167. They've lowered projections sharply.
So it's not that well. I mean, it's going to be lower than that.
Now, I was, and I said this to Pro before, and I want to get y'all's thoughts on this, where this movie's going to open and what you think it's going to wind up doing. Especially if it suffers from the same issues that Doctor Strange does with word of mouth. I think it's going to get a big pop opening weekend because you're going to have that built-in Marvel fan base that's diehard. It's going to go see everything that comes out no matter what. And then if it trails off like Doctor Strange did, had a tremendously hellacious, I think 68% second weekend drop. If this thing, first of all, does it open above or below 150? Now, a month ago, I was saying 70% chance it's going to be over. Now I'm like 50-50 at best. I think this is going to be an issue. I cannot see this movie, if this holds or gets worse, it's not going to make this. Disney is not going to have. There are going to be several billion-dollar films this year at the box office, or at least some that'll get close. We've already got one right now with Top Gun. We'll have probably another one with Jurassic World, in the next few weeks, maybe. Disney might not have a billion-dollar film this year as the box office returns, and we're getting other films breaking that mark without China.
What a shift from 2019.
Ain't it? So what are y'all's thoughts on where you think this movie is going to go? Because as we're looking at this, let me pull this up, because I thought this was so perfect, because this is the pattern we are dealing with now. From Deadline Magazine, Thor Love and Thunder review, this film belongs to Jane Foster. They're just saying it in black and white now. This movie is not about Thor. It is about Jane. It is her story arc. It is her movie. and I thought this was hilarious. I'll bring this real quick because I think
Well,
I still have
the
it as well.
trades tend to be, let's just say, behind the curve, because the trades tend to be spokesman for what I call the club, which is the old Hollywood elite, which is dying under the current situation and hates Bob Chapek and David Zaslav for fighting them. So they're always behind the curve, in the same way that the trades were, especially Deadline was like, Amber Heard is telling the truth. They say that to the day of the judgment, right? They're on another planet, right? So the trades are presenting this, thinking that this is going to impact people. We're going to go see a movie. I think Natalie Portman's a great actress. I enjoy her as Jane. I'm probably going to go see this movie and I'll probably have some fun with it. But there will be people that go, here we go, more feminist propaganda and they're not going to go.
Yeah. I don't care about so much of the feminist propaganda. It's like you call it Thor 4, and it's like, well, I want the movie to be about Thor then, and this is from the Seattle Times. Thor 4 is the worst Marvel movie because it's not a movie, it's content.
Oh, that's bad.
This is the Seattle Times. This is one of the top critics.
Yeah, this is a pretty left-leaning newspaper.
This is what I'm saying is, if we go in here and we actually look at some of these reviews, I'm going to go back to this and pull this up, and we'll just look at the top critics, for example, here. With every half-written joke, the creative stasis settles in like a stale fart. I mean,
you scroll by someone that said it's impossible as it is. This is even worse than a Dark World or Dark World, right? I think I saw that.
Yeah, there's a bunch of that. It's the rare Marvel movie that barely holds together, and obviously there's some positive reviews.
Yes,
they're kind of, a lot of it's like Taika Waititi takes the antics too far, and it's a lot of it's not good. Let's just put it that way. And again, it's very similar to the pattern that I saw with Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and I think you're right, because it seems like, the critics and the reviewers out there are getting, they used to throw a lot of high praise on the Marvel film, so it's either an issue of they never liked them and they felt like they had to say nice things, or, as we've suspected, there has been a very big tonal shift as we moved into Phase 4 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It just doesn't feel the same anymore.
Well, and Waititi is not. He's a loudmouth, and he's also got a lot of drama in his personal life, which Hollywood doesn't like. He's been caught, canoodling with his actresses in various throuple situations, right? And that's just kind of stuff people in Hollywood are like, hey man, we do much worse than that, but we do it behind closed doors. You don't want to be getting pictures of that in the newspaper, right? So Waititi, that's one of the reasons I don't think we're going to see a Waititi Star Wars movie. I don't think it's ever going to happen, because I think the town is turning against him. And if this movie doesn't fare well, it's going to accelerate that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
So a friend of mine said that this is like the feminist version of Austin Powers meets the MCU. And one of the criticisms that I've heard about the movie is that it struggles because it wants to be very funny. It wants to be very stylized. And at the same time, it wants to have a somber, make you cry moment, and that it just does not mesh. And so because of that, it just makes you come away going, what in the world did I watch? So you can imagine if Austin Powers, if you sort of flipped that and made him into a woman, and then had somewhere in an Austin Powers movie, it tried to really have a dramatic moment that touched you emotionally, and you would just say, my gosh, what is this? And so I just don't think the pieces are coming together correctly. Talking about whether or not it's going to break 150 million, I would say that the first weekend actually matters this time for an MCU film. In the past, we always knew that it was going to come out big, and then you look for the second weekend. But the first weekend is going to tell us something. And I think what it's going to tell us is whether or not this Disney backlash, which is now manifesting, we saw this in Lightyear, we wondered if it would happen, right? Would the values of Disney and how those had changed, would it manifest itself in the marketplace? Would the people who were so vociferously speaking out, would they vote with their wallets? Well, they did. If Thor Love and Thunder underperforms and doesn't reach that 150, then it's time to start wondering, has the backlash metastasized to properties like Marvel? Is it moving into not just the children's content, but is it moving into the other branches of Disney? Are people beginning to connect the dots and say, oh, wait, that's that same Disney that's connected with Lightyear, that's connected with Strange World, that's connected with blah, 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 blah. I don't want to go watch Marvel. It's like, is Disney starting to become sort of the hallmark channel of movie studios where you just understand the formulaic nature of what they're going to put in there. And it's no longer edgy because it's just all the same left-leaning content.
Well,
We'll
and the
find out.
problem is, you may very well be right that it's all going to play out exactly the way you're saying, that we're watching it. The problem is, of course, because Valiant's audience and your audience on that Park Place, they want to understand the patterns. And I think we have to remember that all of this stuff that we're seeing, all of this stuff, including Lightyear, including this movie, this is all stuff that was put in the works years ago. Some of this stuff started with Iger, right? And so this is the reap what you sow one moment, right? But the problem is now we're in a new world. We've got new farmers who are having to reap what somebody else sowed, right? And then they're trying to still keep the marketplace wanting their future crop, which they're now putting in new crop and new seeds, right? But will people trust them again? That's the problem that Chapek faces, because he can't derail these trains. He's just trying to minimize the damage. But I think we're going to continue. And I think you're right. I think Thor will underperform. We will likely see, because I see these headlines. Deadline is always shocked. It was shocked when Johnny Depp won the Amber Heard trial. It was shocked. It was shocked when Lightyear underperformed. I remember I put it in my Patreon, the quote, the line where this wasn't supposed to happen. That's in the Deadline review.
Cameron, they always tell us why it happened afterwards, though.
Yeah, of course, then they cover themselves. But the immediate reaction is, this wasn't supposed to happen. Johnny Depp wasn't supposed to win, right? Lightyear wasn't
But here's
supposed to
10 reasons why.
Yeah, afterwards, when they have to process and keep their credibility, they have to
That's
then rewrite history. But, I think we're going to see another one. This shouldn't have happened. How did Elvis beat Thor this weekend? That kind of thing, right? By the way, Elvis is
So here's the curious thing, right?
I want to see that.
So, yes, the chickens are coming to roost, right?
Yes.
And, okay, here's the thing, though. Marvel was the golden goose for Disney for a decade.
Yes.
Okay.
At the theater,
if
for sure,
Marvel
yeah.
becomes damaged, the question for Disney, the question for Bob Chapek is, can I recapture that lightning in a bottle? Can I fix this? And if I fix it, do people just forget about phase 4 and they come right back? And I don't think anybody knows the answer to that right now.
It's going to be a process. Like I said, it's going to be a slow process. I'm trying to put the word out there that Ms. Marvel is a break from phase 4. It's actually the kind of one of my Patreon members said, wait a minute, this is the kind of stuff that they used to make in Marvel that I wanted to watch, right? This isn't phase 4. But it's at this point, because people have lost faith, it's all word of mouth trying to convince them that that's what they're trying to put out there with this stuff. And so it's going to be a painful process. I've been predicting for a year now something that sounds psychotic to people, that Kevin Feige's days are ending. And I've said that here on Valiant's channel. Mm-hmm. And I think if we have another underperforming movie, after we had Doctor Strange underperforming, and now this will probably underperform, then I just think Mr. Feige is not going to be in charge of a lot of the decisions next year. And I think that, the directors of Avengers, of Endgame, have been positioning themselves at least to be a major new voice in the future. It'll take time to get people to believe that's what's happening.
Yeah, and look, and the good thing is, at least for Thor, Love and Thunder, and I think this movie is probably going to teeter right on the edge of about $150 million its opening weekend. I think it might have around $750 million globally in the tank. I can't see it. At this point. If it starts out with a 150 opening weekend like that, maybe another 200 million globally, I think that's probably about as far as it's going to get. The good thing is with Doctor Strange, we say underperform because Disney was definitely expecting that movie to break the $1 billion marker. That they were expecting. Disney was expecting that movie to be their first $1 billion moneymaker, especially coming off the heels of, post-pandemic, coming off the heels of Spider-Man No Way Home, because Spider-Man No Way Home turned in $2 billion, and it had Doctor Strange in it. That was their lead-in. 4 months later, Doctor Strange hits, and then it really struggled. This movie really doesn't have any kind of feed coming into it like Spider-Man. It's no connection to that whatsoever. I think this movie is going to struggle harder, but fortunately, it doesn't have the unbeknownst tens of millions of dollars of additional reshoots, 6 weeks of reshoots that Doctor Strange went through, and everything else that went along with it. It's got, I think Disney definitely doesn't have as much money in Thor as Doctor Strange, if for no other reason but the reshoots. That as far as we know, Thor didn't have any major reshoots.
Yeah, and there's a reason for that, because again, my friends inside of Disney on my Patreon have been saying that the reshoots were an effort to fix the clear wokeness and nonsense that was being put in there, where you had the character of America, who was actually, not likable in the original cut, and she was the strong
America Chavez,
America, angry Latina woman or Latinx woman or whatever they're saying out, Latin E woman, and that it just didn't vibe, and it was not a likable character. So Chapek's like, all right, this ain't gonna work. Like Ms. Marvel, go back and fix it. But from what I'm not hearing that there's any of that political stuff in Thor. It just seems to not be that well made of a movie.
Right. I think, the impression I'm getting from reading this, the reviews that I can totally believe, is that Taika, as much fun as everybody had with Ragnarok, he kind of took that Ragnarok zaniness that seemed to kind of fit into that, like he had just the right amount, and then like pushed. I mean, he went Dark Star on this. He went Mach 10, Top Gun Maverick, Dark Star on this with the zaniness, and it's kind of and I think so, and a lot of the things that I keep hearing, people are just kind of tired of having like the zany Marvel stuff.
Yeah, Thor, the initial Thor movies and the initial Avenger movies with Thor had a balance. Thor, there was always some humor, there was always some fun humor, but then there was serious stuff. I mean, in the original Thor movie, it's fun watching this, Norse god now being reduced to human and getting drunk in the little village. There's fun of that, but it's also, he's trying to get back home to his family, to his people. His half brother has become his enemy, and at the end of the movie, he thinks Loki is dead, and he's crying. It worked, right? Because it was a real movie. It wasn't just about, there's some fun with it. What would happen if a Norse god showed up in this little town in the Midwest, right? You got to have more than that.
Yeah. And I want the Marvel movies to be good. I really do. And it's across the board with Disney right now. Everything seems to be struggling, and they kind of seem to be losing, like Pro said, like we've all said, that kind of brand identity where Disney was always the pinnacle, especially when it came to children's animated films back in the 90s, when that resurgence came, starting with The Little Mermaid. And then in the 2000s, 2010s, when Marvel came around and really and built a whole nother brand out, and all that's, they got all these great IPs, and they're just struggling to figure out what to do with them at this point. It seems like, but I know we're short on time because, Cameron and Pro and you guys, I appreciate y'all being here, but I want to, Pro, any final thoughts that you have on any of this discussion? Thor, what's your thoughts on where Thor is going to perform in terms of the box office?
Thor is hard to predict because it could go either way, and it's not following the same normal formula you would use to assess a movie, right? Because we don't know what level of backlash there will be. And if there is a backlash, and if that becomes a storyline off the first weekend, then that will snowball, and it will do what Lightyear did. Now, not anywhere close to that level of failure. Nowhere even remotely close to that level of failure. But you get the idea, right? Or it could come out with huge numbers in the first weekend, and that propels people to believe, oh, well, it's a good movie, and it'll have a decent run. It also has pretty much a clear runway. And so it's not going to face a ton of competition going forward. So it could have good legs if it has decent word of mouth. But I will end it with this, because if people have been hanging in here this long, let me just say, I'll drop a little exclusive rumor here. I am hearing that major actors, major celebrities are being signed on to the MCU for future films. And I think that there are big announcements on the way in the next, let's say in the next few months. There are big announcements on the way. And so even though Thor, we don't know what it's going to do, I think that ultimately Marvel will be okay, because I think it's too big for Disney to let it wither. And I think that they'll course correct.
That's really interesting that you say that, WDW Pro, and I want to thank you for sharing that insight. It feels true to me, because just looking again at the chessboard that we're looking at, we talked earlier about how Tom Hanks is coming out and supporting Tim Allen and others. Hanks is the ultimate example of the Hollywood insider, but as an actor who's going with the flow, right? And most actors go with the flow. They start jumping on all kinds of ideologies when it's like that's where the flow is, right? And now that they're sensing the flow is in another direction, they're going to move with that. And the fact that you're saying that this is what you're hearing, at a time when Bob Chapek has been renewed and after all this controversy, and and we've had Dana Walden, who survived his execution of her best friend Peter Rice. Immediately she threw him under the bus. For now, but she will. But she's going to be fine because she put out there, this is my boss, and we're going to do what he's literally. Her memo was, we're here to implement his vision, not Disney's vision, his vision, right? So she's covering herself, and they all sense this guy. The system has sensed this guy's won in the same way that Scarlett Johansson figured out he won right after the results came in from Shang-Chi that weren't in her favor. And so actors have to be very good at reacting to the moment, and they live in the moment. Well, the moment has changed. So if actors are now joining the MCU at a time when everyone is attacking Bob Chapek, both on the left and the right, and that Disney is under attack, it means they vibe that the moment is in a new direction, and we're going to go with it.
Well said. Well said. Well, thank you both for being here. I really appreciate this. I went for about an hour, so this is great. I knew we'd kind of run along with all three of us here together, but I think people are really going to enjoy this. At least I hope you have. Make sure you're checking out WDW Pro at thatparkplace.com and Kamran Pasha on his Patreon. Again, the links will be in the description below. But gentlemen, thank you both. Appreciate y'all being here, and let's try to do this again. Every once in a while, at least with the three of us together. I know it's hard.
We're like the Phantom Zone with Ursa, Zod, and Nan. The three of us trapped.
This is true. Well, I think we're going to have some interesting stuff to talk about in the coming weeks. Like I said, seeing what's going to happen with Thor. You're right, Pro. It's kind of got a clear runway. So at least in terms of other major kind of like blockbuster stuff. I don't think there's really anything else out there. I know there's a few animated films yet to come, like the DC Super Pets and all this kind of stuff, which they're marketing that pretty well.
Yeah, that looks good.
Paws of Fury beats Thor, then Get Out. I don't even know.
I don't think anybody's predicting that. Now,
I want everyone to go see Elvis because Elvis is my favorite movie this year. I loved Elvis. I've seen it twice. I plan to see it a third time. So I hope Elvis beats Thor because I love Elvis. And now I feel like going to Graceland as a result of that movie.
Well, thank y'all for being here. It's good to see everybody out there again. Leave that comment below. Share this sucker out. Hit the subscribe button. Do all that fun stuff. And until next time, folks, good to see you. Take care.